This podcast was recorded on Shure microphones.
Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to the first episode of The Front Lounge with KONGOS. Since this is our first podcast and we're just trying to figure it out, I think we should have sort of an official intro and explain why we're doing a podcast, why KONGOS, a rock band of four brothers, is doing a podcast.
That's our official. This is our official open.
You tell me, why are we doing?
Well, let's start each one of us. Let's introduce ourselves. Let's say why we think a podcast might be a good idea. Danny.
Starting with me, the pressure's on. I guess so we could make money. I mean, when somebody said that Bert Kreischer makes $30,000 a podcast episode, I was instantly sold. But beyond that, this is a perfect medium to talk about all the shit that we talk about on the bus or in the studio. We realized, I guess being in the front lounge, that's at least a third of the fun of a tour is being in a moving container and talking in the front lounge and the variety of conversations you get. And
So that's our working title for this podcast is Front Lounge.
yeah.
I think it's a good name. I mean, we'll get to it maybe later on in this discussion as to why we're focusing on buses so much. I mean, obviously for us, it's been a big part of our life, but we'll maybe explain.
Front Lounge or The Front Lounge?
I think the front lounge
Yeah.
sounds more official.
Dylan, why do you want to do a podcast?
Well, we've been away for quite a while in our social media presence and all that stuff, and we've got a lot of good stuff cooking on the stove, according to our last Instagram post. And so we want to talk about all the things we've been up to, new music, new ideas, a bunch of things that are exciting, and can't mention them just yet on this first 10 minutes of this podcast. But
Johnny, why do you want to do a podcast?
I think it's become one of the best ways actually to communicate with people, anything that's like a long form thought. I mean, we all obviously listen to podcasts, all the big ones. We're particularly into comedians and Joe Rogan and Bill Burr and all that. But whenever we've done silly little interviews with interviewers or whatever, it's just annoying to not actually be able to convey anything that we might want to say in a longer form. So hopefully this, for people that are interested, this is a way to actually hear what we might have to say or think about things in a longer form.
Well,
And money also, like Danny said.
Jesse, what I can add to that is that we all like listening to podcasts. If you're driving somewhere or you're on a train or whatever, putting your headphones in and being able to immerse yourself in some slightly longer form thought about any given subject is satisfying. Now, what do we have to say? That's the question. We have lots of in-depth discussions with each other and with other people all the time, and we all feel like we have something to say. The question is, what are we willing to record? What do we want to talk about?
Okay, let me just hit pause.
And we are back. We did a little off-air discussion to discuss the format of this podcast, and we pretty much agreed and arrived at the fact that we're going to do 7 segments each week. The segments could change week to week, but there will always be 7. So the first segment today is
breaking news. And by breaking news, we just mean what we've been up to recently, not just as the band, but personally what we've been doing.
What have you been doing, Dylan?
Well, I've been watching Netflix. No, I've just pulled out my summer garden and going to start planting the winter garden with winter greens and all that. Been doing my morning yoga.
As you can tell, Dylan is the...
He's only been in LA for 6 months officially.
But LA's been in him forever.
He's already...
Well, your garden,
juice.
to elaborate on your garden, we've all been enjoying the fruits of that labor. What did you grow this year?
Tomatoes and zucchini and some peppers. Helped Johnny set up his garden, so they provided, 200 pounds of tomatoes
Yeah, we
this
got
year?
about 200 pounds of tomatoes, 150 pounds of cucumbers or something. Pretty
And all in a
ridiculous.
pretty minute.
Yeah, in a tiny little square in my backyard. Where I live a little bit where we've got more space of a garden here. Dylan's been doing it where we record, which is basically a tiny little, what is it? I don't know, 3 foot by 9 foot
About 6
bit
foot
of
by
dirt that's probably got
12
tons
foot.
of heavy metals because it's
It's amazing what
in
growth
Hollywood.
hormones does.
The LA acid rain comes down, and then we get our metal content for the day.
Johnny, what have you been up to?
My house has termites. It's not my house, but the house that I'm renting. So just dealing with that. And the owner wants to tent it. And I'm not sure how I feel about that because that shit literally kills things and people.
The house next door to me just got tented, and you could smell it from like 100 yards away.
For some reason, I've got, because of nasal necks, I've got Antonio Banderas doing Terminex in my head.
Well,
So-
if Antonio Banderas is coming to tent my house, that's a different story.
First, we will kill all of the bugs.
Have you been doing anything else? Where's your focus these days?
I guess just been writing a lot. That's actually what I've been focusing on at home. And I got this new accordion that Honer sent me, which sounds really, really great. It sounds old. A lot of the new accordions I've been playing lately, just trying out in stores, even if they're like $10,000 accordions, they sound plasticky, and this new one sounds awesome. So I guess been focusing mostly just on writing. I know Danny's been
What have you been doing, Dan?
like a mad scientist.
I don't really sleep anymore at night because of this bloody modular synth I got. Well, I've been putting it together. A modular synth that you get individual modules and you put them into a case. And I'm on the Euro rack format, so it's just standardized.
For the layman listener, he's talking about an instrument, a synthesizer instrument that's made up of different components that you can buy and choose and pick and put them together in an apparatus, and you get all different kinds of electronic sounds.
Right. In a normal analog synth, they've got all of these components, but they're just fixed in their relationship to each other.
Like you buy a keyboard and it has a bunch of knobs and buttons and whatever.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the build-it-yourself version of that, where you can pick and choose the parts.
This is the hermit version of synths.
It's I have a theory, which is that once you get into modular synth world, you have to learn how to make the sound of a girl's voice on your synth, because you'll never hear that again.
Once you go mod, you lose your bod.
Anyway, it's pretty addicting. I can put up some pictures maybe associated
I just
with
thought
this.
we should add, we can have a little photos section on the website. We're going to put this podcast on our website, and it'll also go through iTunes and whatever. But if you want to see, maybe each week we'll throw up a little description and throw photos of what we discussed, so we can see Dylan's garden, you can see Johnny's termite problem, and you can see Danny's modular synth. And what have I been up to?
Well,
I've been being a dad, so just hanging out with Eve, and when I can work, I've been working on all the stuff that we're working on. We're recording, so that's kind of news for us as a band. We've got a lot of exciting things on the way, and everybody's writing and recording, and so at the moment, my current focus is how to mix the next record, because we want to do it differently than the last one, make it sound different, make it sound better. But so I've been obsessed a little with the technical side in a slightly different arena than Danny. And what else?
well, I guess,
I've been taking a lot of baths lately because baths are severely underrated. Every apartment, house, hotel always has showers now, but sitting in a bath really gets the mind going. We've been, if you've seen us in the last year or two at a show, you've probably seen a videographer with us, and we've been capturing everything, recording it,
bathing.
And the idea.
Before you get too far, I'd just like to say that Jesse truly is the Epsom salt of the earth.
very, very, we should have a pun segment that never airs. So we've had videographers with us, and the concept started to arise in our minds of doing a documentary series. And we've gotten very serious about it over the last year. We haven't announced it or anything, but we have been working on a documentary series about our life and life on the road in general. and the music business, and we see 8 to 10 30-minute episodes. So this is a real thing. It's going to be on a real streaming service, and you're going to see an inside look into our life and tour life that hopefully you've not seen before.
Yeah, I guess to talk about it, everyone's doing this now. Like you can't see an album that
every
comes
artist
out
has a
that's
behind
not,
the scenes,
but they all just feel like this amazing, glossy life is amazing as an artist, and look how talented I am, and then I went through this one struggle, and then I put out an album, and they just all seem very produced. So we're trying to find a balance of that where, obviously it is a really cool, fun job what we do, but there is the other side of it where there's the struggle and the completely unglamorous side of things. So we're trying to show that aspect of it, and we have more than enough of the unglamorous footage to go around.
Yeah, it's a mix of that. It's a mix of trying to show the drama but not dramatize. It's removing the filter but not like faking a removed filter. So yeah, it's basically trying to get closer to the truth about touring.
What we want is for you to be a fly on the wall on, tour life, a bus tour, because everybody knows the stories of you two in their private jets and, 5-star hotel rooms and whatever. Most of us probably have a friend who's in a band or know somebody who's in a band that travels around the country in a little van and they sleep on your couch and they go play to 12 people. We did that for a long time. But there's this middle ground of touring, which nobody really knows what the life is like. And you talk to other people who tour, everybody understands it. They understand the struggles of it or the highs and lows of it, but it's not been shown. And that's what we want to show on TV.
You know what it's like? It's like that show Roadies on Showtime. It's exactly not that piece of shit.
There goes our Showtime chances, but
they do get into their bunks. It's called a
suicide. That is actually something. Every single person we've met on the road, everyone watched at least the first episode. We watched the first episode on the bus in the back lounge with a bunch of us in the band and then a bunch of our guys on the crew. And it was one of the funniest things ever, just watching everyone in the crew just go, what the fuck is she doing with her radio over there? Or what is he doing wearing
They got into the bunks with their heads facing the front of the bus, so if they get in an accident, they'll die.
Yeah, that's kind of rule one. Rule one on the bus is you don't shit on the bus. I feel like they did cover that. But rule number 2 should be, if you get in the bus with your head facing forward.
In the bunk.
Yeah, it's kind of an obvious thing, and it's
the underlying falseness to it was the crew just like loving the performance every night and being so excited to watch the same fucking show every night.
It was such an honor to be working with this band, watching them play "Come With Me Now" for the 1000th time.
So, bottom line is that show on Showtime called Roadies was very inspirational to us because it's nothing like that on tour, and we hopefully will help give a real look into it. So,
but
I think that
Luke Wilson will also be in our series.
I think that can bring first segment to an end, and we're ready for the next segment.
Section 2 is about music only.
Right. Music only, as in, it can't be the peripheral nature of music. So what were we talking about, Dylan? Oh, we were talking about I've been telling everybody in the band to listen to "Dangerous," the Michael Jackson album, which obviously everybody's heard, at least most of that album, but to listen to it from a kind of a pop production technical point of view, just because the mixes, especially "Can't Let Her Get Away" and what's it? Remember the Time? Is that the name of it? I can't remember. Yeah, those two songs are amazingly mixed, energetic things. And the reason I got into it was because Dylan and I got in an Uber, and it was like a movie scene. Is the swell of that one track? As soon as we got in, the guy was blasting the track, and we get in, and as soon as he started driving off, the groove kicked in, and it was like a little edited scene of real life.
We were going to this epic Beverly Hills party, just looking over. No, I think we were going to
some showcase
Mexican restaurant or something like that.
No, we were going to that showcase.
Oh.
To go see another band. Anyway, the point is this Michael Jackson record is amazing, and the production on his stuff is so exciting, and it still dwarfs anything going on in pop music in terms of just excitement especially from a production and mixing technical side of things.
Well, I think that's one aspect of our music that maybe is not apparent to a listener. You know, our influences are so diverse, but really, there's a reason why Michael Jackson records sold as many as they did. You know, everyone was at the top of their game who was involved in that, from the artists to the musicians to the mix engineers and everything. And you know, we might do an accordion song with an acoustic piano and the drums might be on brushes, but you can still learn something from a Michael Jackson record in the way that you approach it.
Yeah, one of the things that works about those records is if you listen on a computer, if you listen on really loud on a hi-fi system, if you listen quiet on a little, it still is exciting. The excitement of the records comes across regardless of the medium, and that is beyond just arrangement and all that, which was also amazing because of Teddy Riley and Michael Jackson, obviously. There was Bruce Sweden, the engineer, he had some pretty brilliant techniques, especially for the time. And yeah, it's entirely vibe based. Even though they have all the technical know-how that you could ever need, they didn't let that interfere with their emotional mixing or emotional production or emotional performance of a vocal. Everything doesn't have a lid on it, basically.
What about you, Johnny? What have you been listening to?
It's kind of like Michael Jackson, but it's super obscure and cool. No, I saw this documentary on Netflix about Sufi music, and so I've started discovering...
Sufi being the Muslim sect?
Yeah, it's a sect of Islam, kind of all over the world. They focus on the various different places that you find Sufis, you know, so obviously Pakistan, but the stuff that... Well, the Pakistan obviously is a big connection for us because we all grew up listening to Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, who's one of the great Qawwali, probably the greatest Qawwali performer ever, and he and his family. And that's what influenced our accordion music more so than like what people often ask us, is it like polka or German or like any of the other music that's influenced us is that. But the stuff that I really discovered, and I've heard some of it before, but is this stuff from Morocco, and I'm going to butcher the description of it, but basically there are these women there that are considered healers in the community, and their healing is done through music. So basically music therapy is how you describe it in Western terms, but they talk to the patient and do a diagnosis of sorts of what they think is wrong with them. And generally they would characterize as being something wrong with them at a deeper level, a spiritual level. So whatever you believe about that or not, it doesn't matter. The music's fucking cool. They perform music then specifically for each individual person that they feel helps them. So whatever it is, placebo effect, it works on me because some of that music is just puts you in such a trance-like state that it, at the very least, is a stress removal device.
Well, I think even in modern Western science, that approach is actually gaining some sort of legitimacy. Music there, especially in the coastal cities, it's kind of becoming a thing where you take your kid to music therapy or whatever. What was that show we watched, Mindhunters?
Something just fell down there.
That was an Amazon box. They were discussing even back then the idea of music being a healing force. So, there's plenty of podcasts probably that discuss that much better than we will, but it's certainly a cool
I think
idea.
any kind of knee-jerk skepticism of the idea is just that, because people accept fully the idea that you go talk to somebody for therapy. Like, you can go. You're saying you could fix your problems by talking about it. Well,
all you have to do is go.
Music
is
a much more effective language for most emotional conditions. We think so.
All you have to do is go to a Wailers concert, and immediately you feel the healing effects of it. I mean, do you guys remember that time?
That's called marijuana.
You don't even have to be in 100 yards of weed to get the vibe from that music.
Yeah.
What was it last year that we did that July run? We started off
Idaho.
Sioux City,
Iowa. Yeah.
So we did a festival and the Wailers were on the festival. It was the first show of this run, so we'd kind of been at home. We'd been promoting the record, and nobody was in a touring mindset. And I just remember flying in. We missed a connecting flight, so we had to do an 8-hour drive overnight, and it was just everyone was in a bit of a shit mood. And we walk up on stage just to see what's going on. The Wailers are playing, and I just remember being instantly in a good mood, and it changed my whole outlook on, like, I was ready to tour at that point.
I think everyone felt that way because that was 2016, and it has been 2 or 3 months of just music promotion. Like, we were in promotion mode where we're doing all these miscellaneous little gigs flying around, and that stuff basically just gets annoying. And the crew, I think, was also a bit burnt out. We were all just burnt out, and everybody, I remember just thinking like, oh, this is why we do all this, is because of this. And you just watch a band that just sits so deeply in the pocket, you know?
Because the guitar player can sit there and play a backbeat, you know, the really simple part for just, I don't know, it seems like minutes after minutes and you're not changing his part, and he's just, every single beat means something, and you feel that when someone is performing in that way, you feel it as a listener.
But also, just fundamentally, people believe and accept the idea that you can harm people with music. They use it for, torture, and they use certain music for torture, and they even use certain frequencies or notes. Like what do they call the military has the brown note? Whatever.
I think that's a legend.
It's a little bit of a myth, but recently in Cuba, they believe that they made a bunch of people sick. There was some sonic attack, so if it can harm you.
That's going to be a weird call to get from your publishing saying the U.S. military wants to use your song in.
Yeah, in Guantanamo,
I don't even think they seek out licensing. It's not a public performance. I've heard. I don't know the validity of this because I'm not a frequencyologist or whatever the correct technical term is. But apparently, 19 hertz instills fear.
And didn't you say a lion's roar has a lot of 19 hertz?
Yeah, a lot of 19 hertz, which is right, like 19 hertz is right below what most subs produce.
I can verify that. All I know is when we were in South Africa walking back from dinner to our little lodges on a safari, like a game farm, hearing a lion roar. It could have been a mile away, and often they are very far away. That fear that goes
shakes
through
your
you.
bowels.
It just that is. It just sends us like a little shrill right through your spine.
I have to admit that was all. I had a similar experience because I was trying to take pictures of stuff out at night in the dark, right by where I was staying.
So let's just give it a little context. So when you go on a safari in South Africa, at least at this type of game reserve, you go to a lodge. And there's maybe 5 to 10 bungalows, and then there's a sort of a common house where you go and eat meals and stuff like that. And it's actually open to the wild. There are little bits of electric fence around certain parts, but that's really just to kind of annoy an elephant so that he doesn't go in that area. But it literally can't keep any animal out. So when you walk back from dinner, maybe you walk 100 yards in the dark to your bungalow. There's nothing between you and the wild animals.
Right.
So Danny's walking back.
I was sitting there setting up my camera, trying to take some pictures of like star trails or something goofy, and it's pitch black, and I thought it was a lion. It turns out it was an elephant. So it tells you why I shouldn't be left in the wild. And yeah, that's a different kind of fear. It's not like you can get a fear walking down a dingy alley or whatever, or if we've walked around cities a lot at 3 or 4 in the morning.
You're afraid that the single's not going to do well at radio.
Right. Yeah. You have your social fears. You have your kind of you have your threatened fears in a very small way in certain areas or whatever. Fear of rejection, fear, blah 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 blah. All of this was like instant million-year-old fear. This was fear that
it was also on the same night though that they told us while we were having dinner that it was a few weeks earlier or something at this same lodge that there's a massive tree. I think they said it was an 800-year-old tree or something like that that was on the property, and you eat dinner underneath it. And that a few weeks earlier, a leopard had carried a baboon up into that tree and was eating it
in the camp.
Camp while people were still
we
walking
should
about.
post some pictures of this because we were there last year. We went to South Africa with the crew at this place, and we'll post some pictures up on the site of sitting in all these places we're talking about.
The funniest part for me was the lack of rational there's nothing you could do about it. It's entirely instant, primordial fear, and then you rationalize it away after the fact. But in the moment, there's nothing you can do about it. It's really funny in retrospect.
Let's bring this a little detour of the gamers. Let's somehow bring it back to finish this music segment. So let's talk about South African music for a second. We grew up in South Africa, as many of you know. We lived there for 8 years and saw all kinds of music. And each different culture there has their own style of music. But one of the music styles that we always talk about is called Maskandi, which some people say is sort of the South African blues, but I don't think blues is a good word for it. It's a folk pop music that very often involves programmed drums, guitar riffs and bass and accordion. And if you listen to Paul Simon's Graceland, it's heavily influenced. In fact, he went out there and hired a bunch of musicians that play this style of music. So you can definitely hear it in our style of music. And it's one of those musics that we feel as a band. What am I going to say? Let's see if we are on the same page. What am I going to say about Maskandi music?
Oh, it's the only happy music that's not cheesy.
Well, yeah, you've been saying that even with your new daughter, you can almost be guaranteed a smile.
Her name's Eve, by the way.
I know. I just didn't know whether we're letting the.
I don't know that people know her name. It doesn't matter. The point is, if I was driving home and she was complaining about something in the car seat, I would put on this certain Maskandi song, and she stopped crying instantly, and it worked. It worked without fail. So, that to me shows the power of music.
What's funny is that he would say to me, "This will shut her up."
Music testing on this music has been tested on babies. All right, yeah. So let's wrap that up. Let's do a quick. Our part 3 section is about the music business, which is a good one for us to be short because it gets kind of boring and annoying to discuss. And we have a call with our manager in about 10 minutes, so we'll probably take a little break.
Maybe
and
we
then
could
finish
just
up the podcast.
Yeah, we should. How about it sucks, and then we can move to the next segment.
Or it can be split into 2. We can talk about the music business and then talk to our manager and see if there's any news and then get a report back.
Yeah, if there's good news, we'll tell you that music business is great. If there's not, we'll say music business sucks.
Well, I mean, why don't we pick a specific topic?
Let's talk about radio. How do you get to radio? A lot of you probably heard us first on the radio, and a lot of people don't know this, but we put Come With Me Now out 4 years before it even saw the light of day on radio. And we always look at our YouTube comments and see stuff like, sometimes people say like, this band was clearly put together by a label and produced for pop radio and whatever. Well, newsflash, we couldn't get fucking anyone to listen to that song, let alone play it on radio for 4 years. So how did we get from that to having a number 1 alternative single and everyone hearing it and not being able to escape it in TV ads and shit like that?
Well, I mean, people have obviously got conceptions about how radio works. The old days of how radio worked in the 80s was labels took cocaine and hookers to program directors, and then their songs were played on the radio. I mean, like literally.
We tried that. That's why it took 4 years. It didn't work anymore.
Yeah.
We weren't getting the good quality cocaine. Now, I mean, now it works. It doesn't. It's not the same as that. But it's basically quite a political campaign. A song has to be a genuine hit, I think, still to be a hit. Like to at least
not to get a look,
but to really be a hit.
Yeah.
It's very hard to force something down millions of people's throats.
I don't think that's
for
hard.
too long.
I think it's hard to force something down the programmer's throats because
It's usually the other way around.
Because they've got enough material that all they're interested in is people not changing the channel so that they can increase their ad revenue. Obviously.
So, I mean, basically, with Come With Me Now, maybe just super quick timeline of what happened would explain how it went. Someone in our department, in our team here, I think it was our booking agent, we had booked a little festival in Colorado, so they sent. The song went off to that festival, and one of the local DJs in Denver was going through the bands that were playing and heard "Come With Me Now," and he thought it was really great, so he started playing it on the radio.
Which is Nerf at 93.3.
And it's really, I think that's a pretty rare way that happens. But for whatever reason, he really took a liking to the song. He started playing it, and he was on a Clear Channel station. So,
well, he makes an active effort to promote Riot Fest.
Right.
on leading up to it, which is cool because it ties into everything.
So he plays a song. They have a million ways that they measure data. They call people. They have online things and surveys, and they literally measure every aspect of a song.
Shazam is
And
pretty important.
he got good reaction. So he's one of those guys who said, "Oh, I found something," and he started playing it to his friends at Clear Channel, and then all of a sudden Philadelphia started playing it, and that's how it happened. It snowballed, and then we chased that song around the country. Every station that played it, we went and either met them or did an acoustic thing.
Well,
or
we got
played
label
their
offers about
radio.
2 months into a month or two into Radio Play. A month or two into Radio Play, every single label who had either not responded to an email or rejected us, then I think we got an offer from pretty much every major label.
Yeah, we had like a old-fashioned bidding war. Like it
Right.
wasn't millions of dollars. Like
The
in the old
very,
days,
the
but
very
it was,
best. We won't say the name of the label, but the very best one was we got a decent offer from one of them and then it was right when programming was going to holiday programming. So it was November, leading into Thanksgiving. And
basically the radio stations don't add new songs, or they go to playing like all the stuff you typically hear in alternative
anything
radio.
that's new music gets the play count goes down for a couple weeks so that they can play older material like known hits.
Sublime, Red Hot
Yeah.
Chili Peppers.
Okay,
all
so
that stuff.
so this guy who's watching our numbers at this particular label sees the spin count go down for 1 week, and he rescinds the offer. Mm-hmm. So we're actually really glad that they eliminated themselves from the race.
But he was a VP, I think. He wasn't the best part about it is that when the play count increased, we got inside info that he was yelled at for not signing us. So we would like to thank that person for having a completely emotionless life towards music.
But
Music business update. Our manager is running behind, so we have another 30 minutes to shoot the shit here on this podcast. So let's wrap up the music
Well,
business.
let's just finish the story of that radio thing, because it's basically the song starts to get legs of its own, and it appears like it's just naturally going up the charts. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of lobbying and a lot of us going to do acoustic performances at radio stations to get support for that thing. And eventually, when it crosses into the pop world, then it inevitably ends up costing tens of thousands of dollars.
I think what people don't realize is the amount of political involvement basically at those levels of radio and even higher, especially at the pop level. It's almost like in the final moments before a song goes top 10 or top 5 or then to number 1, it's like what you can imagine a political campaign doing just to get their final votes.
Taking polls and shit like that.
Reaching out to people, calling in favors.
Well, yeah, a lot of the tricks they'll do, or if there's a station, for example, that's not convinced that they should be playing the song yet, but maybe they're willing to try it. They'll play it at 2 a.m. Or in overnight spins. So in order to get a chart position, radio promo people will go and convince some station in Kansas that they should play this, 12 times in overnights over this week, and that'll help to get the play count up to get the number 1, which then is a self-fulfilling prophecy of convincing other people to play it and so on.
I think one of the funny things, like as Come With Me Now was going up top 40 radio, we started getting opinions back from certain program directors at top 40 stations saying that we should cut the accordion bit out at the beginning, or cut the far away section out. Mm-hmm. Basically, like everyone started having an opinion about a song that
a rock and roll song with an accordion and a slide guitar that's about the fucking devil is not built for pop radio, you fucking pieces of shit. Jesus.
Anyway, before we go into our usual downward spiral of discussing the music business, let's wrap it up by saying, so yeah, a lot of people found us because of Come With Me Now. That's our, quote, big hit. Everybody knows the song. A lot of people have heard the song and don't know who the fuck we are. And that was quite evident when we released Egomaniac, because only our core fans came out to see us, and we didn't have another huge hit like Come With Me Now. So that's one of the things we'll probably talk about a little bit each week, is like, what are we doing now? What are we trying to follow up this giant song and turn it into an actual career where people like you, because if you're listening to this, you must be one of our 12 fans who comes to every show. How do we turn that into a full-time, long-term career where you come see us every year? And we're going to discuss it every podcast, and it'll also be a feature of the television show. So That
This
concludes.
is a good segue into our part 4, which we're going to call Member Berries because of these South Park episodes, and we're just going to talk about things that we remember.
So in South Park, there was an episode where they have these things called member berries, which are actual berries that grow on on a.
No, they sell them, I think.
Yeah, but it's like a naturally occurring. This is the concept, and the berries talk, and they just all they do is say, "Remember when in the '80s there was that movie Pretty in Pink?" And they go, "Oh yeah, I like that movie."
It's basically it increases your susceptibility to nostalgia, positive nostalgia. So you just enter this daisy, lazy kind of remembering the good old days.
Yeah.
So
maybe what we should talk about something, since we were talking about those old days, like a memory from being in a van or something.
I think we should talk about Moe's Pringle obsession on the first van tour.
Okay, so Mo is he's our stage manager. He also hosts our VIP check-in and stuff. So if you buy a VIP ticket, he's probably the one greeting you and kind of guiding you around the venue. He also raps. Basically, he started out. He's a good friend from Phoenix. We've known him forever, and he was the first person, call him crew member, to ever go on tour with us, other than our dad. Our dad used to mix us before we could afford to pay crew, and then Mo started coming out, and so he's a good friend who's kind of learned the touring business with us as we've gone from driving around a van to doing what we do now. So
That was 2012. He joined us.
yeah. We were
Basically, he's like the white Kevin Hart. He's ripped. He can do backflips.
he's really funny.
Yeah, when he does push-ups and pull-ups, it doesn't seem possible because he just doesn't stop doing them. But on these tours, his obsession with Pringles really fucked with his image because he, you could always rely on him.
Paint the picture. So you in a van, when you're doing a tour, first of all, you have to book the shows really close together to make it economically viable. So you're doing a show every night, maybe 5-6 nights a week, driving a van across the country. You spend sometimes 8 hours in a van before you actually have to do the show. So you don't have time to stop at a restaurant. You don't have time to make food, usually. So inevitably, we end up stopping at a gas station or Subway or Taco Bell or whatever.
Every single food you eat is a bold new flavor.
Yeah, it's some sort of processed, salty, starchy thing that you can buy in a package that doesn't have a shelf life, and it destroys your body. And Mo was like the perfect visual example of this. He started out in really good shape, and then 3 weeks into the tour, he was. We should find some photos and put this on the website.
Yeah. Like he also made it. For some reason, he became the snack master. Like he would take Instagram pictures.
It's literally boredom. Like I remember those days in the van where you've listened to every podcast you can listen to, and your brain just automatically goes into, well, I've got nothing else to do, and this food is not satisfying me. We should just stop at the next gas station and eat something. And you go walk in expecting the aisle to be different, and you're not going to see like Doritos and Cheetos.
Well, some states you do find chip flavors that don't exist in other states, and that was always a
It's also
thing.
just a matter of no options. I mean, even if you're trying to stay in shape, I think we have a photo where Mo and I are eating ho-hos and drinking whiskey at like 1 a.m. and doing pull-ups. That was our nightly routine.
But
what motel was that?
yeah, this was pre-drinking though, because you didn't.
Somebody
even
had to
have,
drive.
Somebody had to drive, and
Not
you didn't have time. It's
I
like
drove. Almost
Johnny. Sorry,
80% of all drives.
Yeah, if part of the member berries, if we inadvertently refer to Johnny as Joey, it's because his middle name is Joseph and our dad's name is John, and in order to avoid confusion, we grew up calling him Joey, and then he went by John and then Johnny, so
Right.
now he's Johnny.
So, yeah, now that we've covered that, if you ever hear us say Joey, it's because Johnny KONGOS, the accordion player in KONGOS,
World famous accordion player.
yes, he is actually, if you think about it, probably one of the most famous accordion players, because who the fuck knows an accordion player other than Lawrence Welk?
I met this accordion. This is last week. We were in Boston.
Sorry, let me just finish my thought.
Okay.
John Joseph KONGOS, he's the firstborn of us KONGOS brothers. Our dad is John,
That
so
wasn't
we
thrown off a
started.
cliff. He was the only good specimen.
We started calling him Joey, so there was no confusion at home. So Johnny Joe. If you want to really call him something annoying, call him Johnny Joe.
Johnny Joe. What was it? Yeah, I guess that's. We'll post a bunch of pictures from those van tour days. I think we all have hysterical photos. A lot of them of Mo for some reason. Like we have each
He's
of
the
us
most
has an
photographed
inordinate
person.
amount of.
He's also
pictures
the
of
best
Mo.
guy to have on tour because sometimes you just hate your life. You know, when you're playing to 12 people, you're eating shit food, not getting any sleep. You're sitting in an uncomfortable van all day. And look, it's not working in a coal mine, but it can be pretty boring. But if Mo's there, a bad mood won't last very long. He just brings that mood up, and he's a good dude. And
Mick,
yeah.
our tour manager, production manager, calls him a vibe merchant.
So
Yeah, so he's basically risen up the ranks now as our stage manager, which is something he knew. I mean, in the beginning, he was counting T-shirts for us badly, and now he's able to basically run our entire stage show, aspects of it under Mick's tutelage.
Right. And it's funny, you get this kind of mentality when you meet people who are like, oh, I want to be a roadie. You just travel around pushing cases around, which on the massive shows, if you go to an arena show, there is a fair amount of people who are moving heavy stuff or moving stuff around, and it's kind of not technical knowledge. But on our medium-sized tours, which we'll get into with the TV show, every single person is a multitasker. Every single person has
real knowledge.
Yeah, cross-discipline. They know how to... I
think Mo has to sum him up, what he has is real work ethic, and that's what stands out on these tours, because if you go out and think you can kind of just like slack off in the corner and keep going to the water cooler like the typical person you picture in your office that's always on Facebook, you cannot survive on a tour. You'll be fired immediately. People just don't deal with that shit. So maybe we should jump on to
segment 5.
This is a little nerd section where we're talking about our favorite gear of the week. We'll pick basically one item that one of us is obsessed with or is looking at or trying out.
Should we pick our newest purchase? So one thing you may or may not know about us is we produce, mix, write, record, engineer, master, everything. We do everything on our own records. On this record, we are having Michael Quinn, our tour manager, be involved in the engineering as well, because he's super knowledgeable and talented in that arena.
And we're also going to outsource the mastering, probably to infrasonic mastering.
So this segment, we'll see when we get to that. We'll make a decision on how we want to mix and master this record. But this segment, let's pick our most. We are gearheads, so anytime we get money, like if we get a big show, we sell some records or whatever, we just blow it all on gear. So I think let's talk about the Burl B2 Bomber. We just got that. Literally all it is 2 channels of A to D conversion. So it takes an analog signal from the world, whether it's a microphone or whatever, and converts it into the digital world, but with a twist. And we've just heard so many good things about this over the years. We've always wanted to buy it, but it's very expensive. So we decided to try a couple channels, and needless to say, it lived up to expectations.
Right.
So one of the aspects of it... Go ahead, Dan.
I think this is it's a bit like whiskey, this kind of world of audio. You can have increasingly subtle and intricate opinions about minor differences
that all cost you more money,
and that you can be
if
tricked.
you're a connoisseur, you're an asshole.
Right. And also you could very easily be tricked, especially if you're drunk, as to what you're drinking. But so the Burl is, as he said, it's A to D. And it's got, I don't know the technical shit, but on the A to D channels, they're Class A op amps as opposed to Class AB op amps. So whatever the fuck that means, you technical people go figure that out.
So there's an analog aspect to the converter that is subjective and has a certain sound, and it just is. To most people, they hear it and say, "Oh yeah, that's very nice. That's very tasty."
It's reminiscent of the really good qualities of the analog tape days, with none of the resolution loss of the digital days.
So one of the main features that I like is the fact that it has a stepped pot for controlling basically the trim. You can pad back the signal so that you can drive the gear that's before it in the chain, either hotter or colder, and not run into headroom issues or not clip your converter.
It's just an attenuator, but it's a very good quality one.
So what it allows me to do is I can certain piece of gear I want to distort because it sounds cool that way or whatever. I can do that without worrying about how it affects the digital realm, and that's very exciting. And that concludes our segment.
Well,
of,
let me say this, because I'm not on the analog side of things. I'm not anywhere near knowledgeable on that side of things. So what we had Jesse do was set up a blind listening test for us, where we listened to the previous ADs that we were using and now the Burl, put them on 2 channels labeled anonymously, and switched between them, and we all categorically chose the Burl as sounding.
And it's a nice olive green.
Yeah,
I didn't choose the
nice.
Burl
So
initially.
It's nice on the rack.
if there are any non-nerds still listening, we can move on to our next segment.
So this next segment 6, we're going to call "What's It Like Being in a Band with Your Brothers?" This is a question that we have gotten, obviously, every single interview. Everyone asks it, and obviously it's interesting to people. We always get annoyed with the question, but we do obviously understand why it's interesting for people to ask that, because they're trying to relate to their brothers and all that. So to start this one off, we've been sitting in here in our podcast studio trying to figure out what segment 6 is going to be for about, 2 hours now.
Or whether we should even do a podcast.
Or whether we should even do a podcast, because I think maybe one of the biggest questions about being in a band with your brothers is that we are so hypercritical of one another, or hypersensitive to each other, that is something that does get in the way of perhaps just going with an idea or not going with an idea, because everything that your brother does, and you have an opinion about, and it maybe sometimes interferes with the ability to just like go down a road, like strangers might go down a road of an idea.
Yeah, so should we do a podcast? This has been the debate now. And we get into these modes where it kind of paralyzes an idea, because things come up such as, well, should we be revealing this much about ourselves and the band, or should we try and maintain some mystery like Pink Floyd did? And the fact is, the world has changed. We don't know how the fucking world works in terms of a rock band. How do you sell yourself? How do you sell your music? Why do we have to do Twitter? Why do we have to do Instagram and Facebook? Why do we have to do interviews on VH1 where they bring flashcards and we have to make some stupid game out of it?
Right. So everybody's got, I can boil the problem down to, we've got this romanticized idea of what, a mysterious rock band with, putting on fucking Stonehenge and having the druids and all that kind of thing, presenting this deep, considerate part of themselves. That's the only thing they ever show to the world, and there's no humanized element. Because you want to be larger than life, so that's our motivation. We want to be larger than life all the time. But the fact of the matter is, there's no heroes. There's no. Even there obviously are. People do amazing shit all the time, but they also take a shit every day, and they talk nonsense, and they're not these considerate, deep people perpetually. So this is our fundamental debate. Do we lie to you and pretend to be greater than we are, or do we acknowledge that we're basically people?
One of the only upsides, I think, for doing a podcast, well, not one of the only, but an upside for me would be so that we don't have to do Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook, because I've grown to fucking hate it.
I think that's,
even though I look at it, and even though I am addicted to the habit and the feed of looking at Facebook and Instagram and stuff, it's become an absolute dread of having to look at it or do a post or answer a comment or anything like that.
Yeah, I like making one picture black and white and then another picture red, because I like the way it looks. And it's cool when I get to go look at my Instagram page and there's a nice grid of red and black and white images. But I mostly go through and delete selfies. A couple weeks after, because I find them so embarrassing. Not the actual selfie, not the way I look. It's just the
The fact
the
that you
pathetic,
post it.
the pathetic attempt at self promotion, which this is partially this podcast, which is music, which is every element of our lives. There's some performance aspect to it, even right now, obviously.
I think there's an interesting thing. Like, we know several people. We won't name them. People that we've worked with, and people in bands, well-known bands that are not on social media, that actually have accounts, because even they cannot stay away from just looking and wanting to see what's going on, because we basically all waver between the fact that, like Dylan said, I fucking hate the idea of having to use social media, and if there was a thumb tracker, it would probably show that I'd looked at Instagram 600 times today. For what reason?
Probably more than your average person, because we don't have 9 to 5s. So we have even, I guess your average 9 to 5 now is also, you can just like fucking look at Facebook all day. So the only people left on Earth who are not just looking at social media are people drilling to the center of the Earth.
It's also a little bit different for us. The thing I dread about it is, when we first started our social media accounts and then we went and we got signed to the label, everyone at every company and every business side in music, they tell you got to show a little bit more of your personality. Let the world into your life and all that. And when the label starts saying that, and it's like they're basically saying, contrive some personality that you can show to the world, and that's what it feels like every time you're about to do something,
right?
Or about to share something that the moment's already passed, the moment's already happened, and now you're sharing it. You start to question why you're sharing this with people.
Well, it's also the deification, that's a big word, guys, of personality, as if personality should be necessarily the focus of things. And obviously, like, it's basically, we're trying to understand where we can use that idea of personality as a tool, because it does seem ephemeral and meaningless in the real scope of what's important to us and what makes us truly find joy or interest in life.
So let's try to leave it like this. We are musicians, songwriters. We've been doing it our whole life. It's the kind of primary driving force behind us being a band and brothers and all that. But in today's world, you have to do 12 million things to get your music out there. And so we're trying this podcast. At the moment, if this is airing, we have decided to go with it. And we're going to do several episodes, and then we're going to say, is this a good idea or not? And it's an interesting experiment. So...
yeah, I mean, maybe this What's It Like to Be a Band with Your Brothers could be a regular segment, because there's all kinds of different dynamics that we can talk about.
Well, I personally think next time we should keep fucking recording, because the most interesting thing we said all day was our stupid argument that we didn't record.
Next week on What's It Like Being in a Band with Your Brothers, we discuss each other's lyrics and which ones we hate. And
Actually, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Today's segment 7 is Deep Thoughts. Okay, so let's get semi-serious for a minute and discuss something. We're all interested in all kinds of ideas, philosophies, mathematics, religion, all these kinds of subjects that you might discuss over a cup of coffee or a brandy in a cool bar with a cool hat. We love talking about these things, so let's pick a topic and discuss one. Okay, how about this? Since a lot of what we talk about, and probably we'll talk about on this show, is music or music business or touring or whatever related, let's talk about how that relates to your inner life. We can all agree that we have some sort of inner life. We live in a little world that's in our head, and it's not, we don't blurt everything out that goes in our head at every given moment. But I can remember feeling when we started touring heavily, especially on the bus, and you're sleeping in a bunk, the bus drives overnight, you wake up in a new city every day. It's quite disorientating at first. And I can remember having a thought like, okay, well, literally everything that I thought of as me or mine, or, my bed, my routine, my home, my toilet, or my daily breakfast, or whatever, all these things that you kind of associate with me, this feeling of me, kind of get taken away. So it leads to the question, well, if I'm not those things, then what am I, or who am I? And clearly it's it's the fundamental question of life, and much smarter people have thought about it. But in specifically relating to tour life, who wants to say something on that?
I think it is one of the things that highlights that feeling that you have, or it highlights the question, because it's the fact that your routines continue, but every single day it's in a different environment that highlights the cyclical nature of it. And because it's easy to just kind of forget about that in a normal life where you wake up and go to the same bathroom every morning and go to the same coffee machine and do all that. But when every morning the same cycle of life occurs, but it's in a different place, it's that juxtaposition that really makes you start wondering, like, who is this person that's doing all these things? If everything changes and I feel so different, why do I feel different in those different environments?
I think just interrupting any kind of habit can potentially, if it's in a big enough way, can give you those sensations. Because I thought that I remember specifically the first couple nights, waking up on a highway was a very bizarre thing, because you associate sleep and going to bed with being stationary, generally, or it's the novelty of sleeping on a plane or in a car or something like that. It's not like a regular thing, and for some reason being in a bed on a highway is a very unusual fucking sensation.
Well, and it's because, I mean, everyone's had this feeling before, but it happens more often, I think, for people on traveling jobs, that you truly wake up and don't know where you are. You know, like the amount of times, even this year, just doing a couple flaggies, I've woken up in a hotel room to, whatever, just get up, and I do not actually know where I'm at for, a good 30
I never know where you are.
And it's disorienting to your feeling of who you are.
Yeah, I mean, I've literally forgotten my name. No, I mean, I've had that one or two times where I literally forgot my name. Like,
you mean right after you woke up?
Right after there's a state,
not in a waking.
No.
I think you should tell us this stuff off air first.
I think there's an element of attachment to specific things like that, like routine. That when people first come on tour, where they first join a tour, you can see how it might be difficult for them to kind of get into a new kind of routine. So a lot of times, I think some of our crew that were hadn't been on the road before, that ended up not sticking with us because they didn't like the lifestyle. I think there was a lot of attachment to certain things that they did consider that were theirs, and that they had ownership of, or that they really enjoyed the comforts of their existence before, and then coming onto the road, when that gets completely thrown out of whack, they start to realize that, okay, this is not for me. And
it takes a while. I mean, I think after a certain amount of touring, it's almost like it becomes normal again, and you feel like yourself no matter where you are, no matter what bunk bed you're in, or plane or hotel or venue, it all starts to feel, you have the sort of feeling of home even though you're not home. But there's a good period of time where that gets thrown out, and I think it's not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing to be confronted with that, because it proves to you, if nothing else, that you are not your routines or your stuff or your neighborhood or your local bar or whatever, you think of as, oh, this is me and my friends, or this is me and my job and whatever. That proves it to you. And I think that's a good starting point to at least begin the question of,
Well, I think you definitely see a difference between people who've been on the road for a long time versus people who've just beginning to get on the road, like Mick, or Garen, a couple of guys on our crew, when they don't get bothered easily by little things. They can adapt to so many different scenarios. They're not bothered by a little bit of discomfort here or there. And I think that translates enormously into their real life. Other than Garen, if he doesn't have his fancy coffee, that may be the one thing.
He's like a moody Swiftie. He's like a moody Taylor Swift fan pre-coffee.
It's interesting to see, like Jesse was saying, that eventually you do kind of normalize to it, but that just shows how powerful your brain is at sorting out situation. Like its natural state, it seems to want to find, is order.
And also
things.
mechanical habit. Because
it relies on that, because if every moment, every aspect of your life was novel, it would be overwhelming.
I think Jessie had a kid, so we've been able to, and obviously you're with her every day, so you get to watch this much more often. But even with the regularity that we see her, you can see that happening, and you can get into any kind of psychological ideas about how your sense of self forms. If it's got to be to do with, at least related to the fact that you wiggle a toe and you see it happening, and then you link the voluntariness of that, and you start to become attached to your body initially, and then that body, or what you define as your body, can obviously extend to outside of your body, so you can become attached to your home,
right,
and so on.
Basically, through life, from being a baby to adulthood and then death, you are systematically training your brain to no longer look at things other than as something that you've already seen before, or categorizing it in context with something you've already seen or experienced before. So, this is the problem of philosophy and existence and existentialism and all that. And, we could start to sound like a Woody Allen film here, but, this is stuff we like talking about, and it comes out in our music, I think, and we maybe pontificate now and then. But the question of who am I, something essential.
Yeah, how you categorize things, I think, is also like there seem to be these fundamental categories of there's me, mine, not me, and not mine. There's kind of 4 basic categories of possession and being that are, and everything seems to fall into that. And there's those Alan Watts lectures about, well, where does the sun end? Those are really good lectures, I think, to introduce you to that kind of.
I think this is something that was interesting about touring. Is the first year we were on the bus, I don't know how many of these types of conversations we had on the bus. Us as brothers in a band and the crew, because we would just, we'd party in the front lounge and everyone would just go to sleep, and we'd be thinking about ephemeral things. But eventually there's only so much partying and talking shit you can do. We haven't found the limit of it yet, but it does reach a kind of boring point. And the last couple bus tours, there's been a lot of 3 or 4 a.m. conversations with miscellaneous groups of people. Some of us, some of the crew, all just sitting in the front lounge at 4 a.m. driving through Kansas, trying to figure out the meaning of life and all that.
It's especially funny when only one person, or 1 or 2 is high, because they cannot. They're either thinking way too deeply about everything you're saying, or being really emotionally attached to it. Or they're just on another planet.
Yeah, I don't think it was a coincidence that this tour were weed legal states, so those type of conversations were more happened more often. Whereas
Washington,
before we were going through
Oregon,
Poland, where you were drinking
Colorado.
vodka.
I think you get equally valid ideas and things out of that as well.
I'll tell you, it's just
not
funny.
12 shots in.
Right. No, I just mean I think Eastern Europe was just as stimulating as the best fucking weed you could ever get. Because weed loses its effect.
I just think I've had these funny memories of being right in the middle of what I thought was some profound thought, and then Mo walks in his boxers, brushing his teeth from the back lounge, and it just it makes you put all your deep ideas in perspective.
That sounds like a good finishing statement there. We're going to pontificate and philosophize for about 10 minutes a week, and then something's going to bring us back to our everyday reality, and it may or may not be Mo in his boxers brushing his teeth.
No, actually right now is we have to do that call. So,
okay.
Yeah. Goodbye, maybe.
Well, okay, so for now, working title, Front Lounge. This is our podcast. Thank you for listening to our first episode. We're figuring this shit out. We don't know if anyone's going to listen to it.
Let us know if you like it, and don't let us know if you don't.
Yeah, positive feedback loop will keep this podcast going. If we hear too many negative comments, fuck you, we won't do it.
All right, see you guys later. If you enjoyed this, make sure you subscribe and check us out at kongos.com/podcast.